All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA DFS video. Have a fun Thursday slate for you guys. Right out the bat, what are your thoughts for this slate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big one. A lot of spots we could consider. I think the big piece of news that we already have is that Anthony Edwards is out. A lot of value coming from the Minnesota Timberwolves, of which I like to varying degrees. And then we also have Jimmy Butler still questionable. We saw the other day with him out, Hero still out as well. There's a lot to like there if he's out again. They're in a matchup with the Pacers here, who have been, I think we've called the Coors Field of the NBA, that matchup. So really, really like the Heat if Jimmy's out. Already have to like some of those Timberwolves value. And it is the NBA. I'm sure we get stuff we're not expecting to break throughout the slate as well, or throughout the next hour.
Let's start with that Minnesota situation. So Towns is not really pulling in chalk, and I don't think he's that priced up, which to me, that was my first surprise of the night. I thought he'd be kind of chalk. Where are you leaning with him, Towns, just in general?
I like him a lot on both sides. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to prioritize him, but at the same time, I mean, any Towns I'm landing on, I do feel pretty good about. I wonder if people are looking at that last game where he only had 29 fantasy points, but that was a really slow game for some reason against OKC. Trying to see how many fouls he had. But yeah, that was an outlier. Like before that, he'd been crushing. I know a lot of us have been playing him a lot the past week or so. Even with Edwards in, he's been really effective. And we get that power forward eligibility on FanDuel. I think he still has it on DK as well. Yep. So I love him, man. And seeing he's under 20% still on both sides, it seems too well owned, in my opinion. I like him a lot here.
Yeah, that was an initial shock. And like looking at the last game against Utah, he played 32 minutes, had like 39 fantasy points just in that. Now you take off Cat, he gets a massive usage bump. I don't know. That seems to be a slight oversight to me. And also, for what it's worth, like Gobert not getting that much ownership as well, at least on DraftKings, where he's 7.4. I also found that one to be a little bit strange. I think he's going to give us a safe like 40 fantasy points tonight. I kind of get why people might not be getting to him as much. But what are your kind of thoughts for him as well?
Yeah, I don't mind Gobert. I mean, the difference is you don't get that power forward eligibility, so there is some opportunity cost at center. There's a few decent value centers and pay up centers tonight. But yeah, I mean, he's not a guy who's always heavily involved on offense. I mean, it is nice that they have Mike Conley there. They do run the pick and roll pretty well. But for me, I prefer Towns of the two. But I mean, if he's not going to draw ownership, it definitely makes sense to get some Gobert as well. It's like I trust these guys more than some of the chalk that we're getting from Minnesota.
Yeah. Is there a situation where you just go maybe one or the other in like a couple, if you're doing a handout or something like that, maybe, or I guess.
I mean, I really like Towns. Tonight I'm playing, I think, the 100, the 50, the 25 on FanDuel. That's it. I plan to have Towns in probably two of those three. I don't know that I'd force Gobert in the third. Just, again, I'm playing on FanDuel where you only have the one center spot. But, yeah, I mean, it's such a good matchup, though, that you could probably get away with both. They do share the floor together. But, yeah, I guess there's some slight blowout risk here. So, I don't know. I don't know that you need to set a rule or anything like that. Yeah. Again, with Edwards out, there's a ton of usage to go around.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those other players. We have Mike Conley pulling in as kind of chalk for FanDuel. That is a play that makes sense to me. Someone like Shake Milton, I thought he would get a little bit more of a minutes bump. You know, he's an okay value, I would say. But Kyle Anderson, Alexander Walker, and also Naz Reid, those are the players that are pulling in kind of the most usage, the most ownership. Where are you prioritizing those guys? And also Troy Brown pulling in some ownership as well. Where would you prioritize those four players specifically? Anderson, Alexander, Reid, and Brown.
Yeah, I will say Conley on FanDuel is essentially a lock. They didn't raise his price. 5,300 is just wrong. Like, even with Edwards in, I've been playing him a ton. He gets you 25 to 30 fantasy points with Edwards in every night. If he's going to take a few extra shots here, that could certainly be increased. On DK, he's fine, but definitely just like a dart. So, yeah, when it comes to these chalk pieces, I mean, Alexander Walker should get the start. He's been solid. The price is up a little bit, but I do think I trust him more than Brown coming off the bench. Kyle Anderson kind of relies on stocks. You need the steals, blocks, rebounds, etc. Again, he's also coming off the bench, so if this game were to get out of hand, he'd probably be a guy who loses a stint late in the game. This is all speculative, but for me, I trust Alexander Walker the most, which is kind of tough to say because he is probably more scoring dependent than Brown or Anderson, but at the same time, I mean, the reason we like them is because they should be taking more shots here with no Anthony Edwards. It's not like you're getting extra rebounds with Cat and Gobert on the floor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really like Alexander Walker. 58% on FanDuel feels a little heavy, but
Yeah.
unless we get more value to open up, I do think it's tough to get away from. And then same with Troy Brown. Not only is he cheap, but small forward, I mean, almost every slate is the toughest spot to fill. So you could go with Anderson, you could go with Troy Brown. But yeah, I think they're both fine. I mean, they're going to have to play extra minutes, and we're still without, I think, Jaden McDaniels,
Yep.
which also creates additional run in this front court for some of these guys. I'm a big fan of Naz Reid personally. I don't love that he's just as popular as the other. So,
Mhm.
like when I first looked at this slate, I was like, "Oh, nice! This is a night where I could pivot to Nas off of Anderson. Good way to get different." But he's on like 30+%, so there's not a huge leverage point there. I don't mind mixing him in on either side. On FanDuel, he's 5,100, but he is power forward eligible. Kind of a dart there. Maybe I play him in my lower dollar single entry stuff. But yeah, I mean, if there's anything I trust, it's Conley on FanDuel, and then after that, I guess it's Alexander Walker. I will have Brown and Anderson in lineups, though. It's just I don't know, man. It's a little bit strange, like
Yeah.
playing Anderson off the bench constantly, and then I don't know if Nasri gets hot, they let him run. But who does that get into? Is it Brown? Is it Anderson? I mean, there's a lot of question marks here.
There is. There is. I would agree with that call, though. Like, Mike Conley is pretty much the one play, especially on FanDuel, that I feel confident that's going to hit value.
Yeah, and I will say this. I mean, he's overpriced on DK, but I think as a way to get different, that's it right there. I mean, if you're going to get Conley at 5%, you are paying up to be contrarian. You're going to have to find value in different places. But if some of the chalk busts for Minnesota, we have seen Conley hit 40+ fantasy points, which is what he's going to kind of need at this price. But with Edwards out, I do think the likelihood of that happening is at least a little bit higher. So this is more like a high risk, large field type pivot.
Yeah.
At 6,400, don't love the price, but again, with Edwards out, it's not going to shock me to see him have a really big night here in a pretty soft matchup against the Jazz.
Definitely. Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to Miami. This is kind of going to be speculative as well. We currently have Jimmy Butler projected for minutes. So
he's in. It just came out right when we started. It says on track to play.
Okay. So projected at 34 minutes. Then you got Bam there. So Bam, is he a little bit too high priced now? If Butler's in there, maybe a little bit of the usage is gone.
Yeah, I mean, normally I'd say yes, but like for a pretty big slate, we don't have a ton of centers to pay up for tonight. I mean, unless you consider Giannis a center.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, AD is center only on DK, but usually we have guys like Jokic, Embiid, Sabonis, etc. None of those guys are on this slate, so I am actually getting to some Bam. Again, it's a really good matchup against the Pacers, near 240-point total. Still no Tyler Hero, so he's getting extra usage. Even with Butler in. And I mean, there are games where Butler just kind of defers to the rest of the team. He kind of acts as a point guard. So I don't know. If there's anything here I like, I do like Jimmy at his price.
Yeah.
But normally I'd say Bam's overpriced tonight for me. I think I want to get him into a lineup for sure. And he is center only on FanDuel. So it's not easy, but again, I love the matchup.
I think that makes sense, and I do think Jimmy Butler, GPP wise, not too high owned, not too high priced. I think that does make sense. Another spot I do want to touch on is actually going to be Charlotte as well.
Good call.
Still without LaMelo Ball. We saw Brandon Miller is someone that does get a big bump in usage. He didn't exactly have an awesome game last game. The game was kind of a blowout, which is still a concern here. 8.5-point spread. PJ Washington was kind of, I would say, a pretty good call I had on the last slate, and we kind of had the same situation where, at least on FanDuel, Gordon Hayward's pulling in as kind of chalk. I think PJ Washington could still be a good pivot off of him on the slate, just because he's getting those backup center minutes. They kind of need him to be productive. Kind of what are your general thoughts for Charlotte as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think Miller's still questionable as we start to talk about him. I will say he's the most mispriced of this group, though. And I don't know if it's something we can rely on moving forward, but he did see a much higher usage rate than Gordon Hayward. I had a ton of Hayward. I was so frustrated watching him play, just not taking any shots, like just kind of hanging out. That game did turn into a blowout. It was a tough matchup against the Knicks. The Nets have actually been half decent on defense, though. So I don't know. I think it's a similar matchup, maybe a little bit softer. I like Miller at his price. I do like Terry Rozier, again, with LaMelo out. He's going to have to see increased usage. But yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here saying Hayward he's left a bad taste in my mouth, but I'm thinking that's probably why his ownership is down, especially on DK. On FanDuel, though, 5,600, it is tough to get away from. So for right now, I have Miller slated in. If Miller's out, it's just very easy to go to Hayward, Rozier, even Bridges, who's more expensive. I do like pieces here because the prices haven't really adjusted for LaMelo being out yet.
I have Rozier pulled up right now. He had a terrible night shooting, 5 for 16, only 21 fantasy points in that game. Not that many assists. The team just didn't really show up in that game. No. You'd expect the assists to be a little bit higher, maybe a couple more rebounds as well, and you easily expect the points to be double what they were. And so, he's probably hitting value most nights at this price tag, but with ball outs, he should most likely exceed it. Now, what are your kind of thoughts as Brooklyn has a matchup? Last game, he had 41 minutes. I think that was an OT game. Had 44 fantasy points in that game. Obviously, ball was in that game. Kind of what are your thoughts with the Brooklyn matchup? Is that a plus? Is that a minus? Or is that just not really a factor?
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively neutral. I mean, the Nets do have decent defense with Dinwiddie hanging out in the backcourt, Bridges, Johnson when they're on the floor, solid defenders, Claxton good in the paint. But it's like they're a good team defense. They don't really match up well one-on-one. But we're going to see guys like Finney-Smith and O'Neal coming in off the bench who are really solid on the wing. So, I don't know, it's a good matchup. But again, it's more the prices for me, why I'm getting to the Charlotte Hornets. I do think they're still a bit underpriced. I will say I'm very excited. My boy Cam Thomas is back tonight. Don't know that I'm playing him on TK, but at 6K flat on FanDuel, I'm a little bit interested. But when he's on the floor, that hurts their defense. Definitely an offensive player. So there are going to be spots for the Hornets to hit shots. It's just a matter of if they're going to fall in. Because, again, we saw Rozier pretty aggressive but missing shots. Hayward just kind of giving up. And then, I mean, Miller was good. And then I think he got hurt late in that game. But, yeah, it's just I like the spot. I don't love it. But, again, they're just mispriced. And knowing that we don't have that value in Miami now, like if you're not just loading up on Minnesota and everything, then yeah, I think Charlotte's one of the teams that does leave a little bit of meat on the bone as far as these prices go.
I do want to get your thoughts on Brooklyn as well. With Cam Thomas back, obviously some of the usage is going to be spread out now. Like Mikal Bridges, probably a little bit overpriced. Spencer Dinwiddie becomes even more inconsistent as an option. He might be a little bit overpriced. I still think Nick Claxton's a fine play, especially on DraftKings where he kind of seems clearly mispriced. But what are our thoughts there? Cameron Johnson might be not as safe now. Yeah.
No, I mean, the Nets turn into one of these teams where it's like they're the ultimate last piece in. Like, you have a guy at every position you can use. Like, if you land on Dinwiddie, fine. If you land on Thomas, Bridges, etc., okay. Like, none of them are priorities, though, except for Claxton on DK. I agree with you. He is underpriced. This is a good matchup for him against Williams and Charlotte, who have not been very good in terms of front court defense. So, I do like Claxton here. But yeah, they're all kind of priced up as though Thomas is out, and Thomas's price didn't really come down enough, even on FanDuel, for me to be rushing there. If we got word that he has no minutes limit, I do think 6K flat on FanDuel is too cheap. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, it's not going to be surprising if Bridges gets hot and they're just going to him. It's one of these teams now, and like, I mean, when the Heat are healthy, they're kind of like this, like, there's enough good players that you don't know on a given night who's really going to go off, and there's not a lot of value on these price tags other than Claxton, who you mentioned.
I gotcha. Do you think the Utah situation is all too noteworthy or not?
I mean, it's worth talking about, especially if you're loading up on Minnesota. I mean, there is some correlation there in running it back. I mean, Keontae George, who I think Steve Nance is shouting out Chuck on some best ball takes early in the year. He's been excellent, but the price is up on him. I think everyone wants Collins to be a thing with marketing out, but his rates really just haven't jumped. So I don't mind Clarkson here, but he's kind of a tournament play where he's priced, but yeah, I mean, with Laurie out, we should be seeing extra usage for these guys. But right when Laurie went out, Kessler came back. So it kind of just like balanced out in a weird way. So I don't know. I think they're kind of similar to the Nets. I think they're okay, but I'm really not rushing to anything there. And it looks like Matthew Katona in chat just let us know that Brandon Miller is out. So you go back to Charlotte, I guess.
Yeah, let's just talk about it real quick. So my instant reaction is that probably Rozier will get a little bit of a higher usage bump there. Miles Bridges is just kind of an okay play. Maybe Ish Smith is actually a decent value today. I kind of mentioned he could be someone that might be decent, or it's going to be Bryce McGowan's. Like one of those two is going to get a bump in minutes, probably 25 minutes, and we probably want to get to one of those two. Do you have any kind of initial thoughts there?
My initial thoughts is Washington's going to start now. So PJ Washington had been coming off the bench even with LaMelo out. I think the starting lineup's going to have Washington at the 4, Bridges slides up to the 3. But yeah, I love Hayward now, which feels terrible after last slate. But Hayward and Rozier are the prizes here. I do think Washington at his price is solid, but we have seen even with him starting, he doesn't tend to play 30 plus minutes. I mean, I don't know. Earlier in the season, he was, but for whatever reason, over the past few games, like they seem to just be capping him at 30. And I don't know if it's because he's not closing. I don't know if they want more minutes for Miller as they're developing him. It's weird. It's another weird situation with the young team. They're kind of pseudo tanking. So yeah, I really like Hayward. He's going to be unavoidable on FanDuel where he's way too cheap. Washington's really solid at a thin power forward position, and then yeah, I think Rozier's fine. Bridges is fine. But as far as McGowan's or Ish go, that's a little bit tricky. I don't know if I want to go down there.
Yeah.
We also have Theo Mallet on in that guard rotation, so yeah.
Has he gotten minutes this year yet? I don't know.
He hasn't been playing much. I mean, it would be Ish of that group if I have to pick one.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping I don't.
I'm waiting for the other UCLA player, Amari Bailey, to start getting minutes, like Jaime Jaquez was. It's he's a decent player. I'm waiting for it. I think that's the situation that we circle back to before the end of the video and just see kind of what the data has.
Yeah, I'm sure the model's in progress updating right now.
So yeah, we'll go on and move on into the guard plays here. Just in general. So let's start with the top plays via the OF index. So it's Trey, it's SGA, Halliburton, Curry, and we didn't mention is CP3 still out as well?
CP3 and Wiggins are both out. So CP3 is going to miss a couple games. Excuse me, and I did see Wiggins was ruled out, so that should mean extra usage for Curry and Clay. And we were trashing on Clay, I think, as recently as last week, but since then, maybe he watched the show and he's been shooting a lot better. So yeah, he's been looking better, and it's not a terrible matchup with the Clippers. It is a back-to-back for them. Don't mind Curry or Thompson. Thompson feels a little bit too cheap on FanDuel, but they're more tournament plays to me. But I do think with Chris Paul and Wiggins out, there is definitely usage to go around. The interesting play, I guess, is going to be Moody. Like, is Peyton still out too? And like,
Payton's still out.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Moses Moody. I guess if he starts, he's going to be appealing his value. Like, I'd rather go to Moses Moody than like an Ish Smith. I will say that. But
yeah, it seems like either Pods is going to start or Moody, and you probably maybe end up on one of those two if they do start. Obviously, Moody a little bit appealing on FanDuel. But Curry, too, on FanDuel, 8.9. Like, that's it. I want to get to him there.
Agreed. Yeah, he feels too cheap, man. Back-to-back games with 50-plus fantasy points. Yeah, his price hasn't moved. Only going to see more usage. Yeah. And, yeah, I'm with you, man. That's I was really highlighting Trae Young when I was looking at this slate earlier, but the more I look at it now, I mean, 8,900 for Curry is just wrong. He should be probably 1K more on FanDuel.
This is already one of those slates where I'm like, all right, got to make some more FanDuel builds tonight. Looking at it, yeah, Clay's pretty cheap there. Let's just look at the other guard plays, though. Jalen Brunson's in an okay spot, not getting too much ownership. You actually have Lillard pulling in about 12% ownership on DraftKings. That seems interesting to me. Zach LaVine, about 10%. It does seem to be like the ownership is pretty spread out. I'm actually just going to sort it by DraftKings ownership. Alexander Walker, Brown Jr., those are kind of chalk, but Quickly still chalk. That's interesting to me. Bogdanovich, kind of chalk. What is your initial thoughts on the chalk that we have right now?
Yeah, the Quickly one's a little bit weird to me. I think it's a price thing against Detroit. He has been really solid, and I think he does get run when they do blow teams out, which is definitely a possibility here. I think Detroit's lost 13 in a row or something ridiculous. So I don't mind him, but it's not a guy I ever like to play as chalk. I don't mind Bogdan. The big thing for Atlanta right now is no Jalen Johnson. We have seen his usage go up. He's kind of scoring dependent, but most guards are. So, yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at the chalk here, I mean, don't feel great about Quickly. I think Brown and Nah are kind of necessary evils. I really do like Trae Young, though. And if Moses Moody does start, he is going to be one of your better value plays. But if Pods gets the nod and he's coming off the bench, or if I guess they go to Kuminga and want to go a little bigger, wouldn't shock me either. I think other than that, the ownership's flat. So you can kind of play what you like at guard tonight.
Yeah. I still like Malcolm Brogdon too at 6% and 13%. I feel like he's a little bit too low or too low priced on FanDuel there. I don't know. He
Yeah.
just seems like a very safe play. And again, the bet would be on him and the Trailblazers really keeping the game close and really Jeremy Grant not going off to the point where Malcolm Brogdon isn't needed in the second half. So I think he's a decent player. Are there any plays that also stand out to you?
I mean, whenever you could get guys like Halliburton or SGA relatively low owned, we're showing
Yep.
Halliburton sub 5%. Not the best matchup with Miami. But yeah, still very high total. And then we have SGA. I mean, his ownership has climbed up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we always say whenever you can get these guys that are going to rate well in OF index at low ownership, they make sense in high risk contests. Get a little weird. I mean, I don't know. I think that's it. D'Lo's coming off a massive game
Yep.
for the Lakers. I do want to say this. He's had huge games this year. They've all come against the worst teams in the NBA. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. OKC is not that. This is not a great matchup for him tonight. So I probably wouldn't go back there. One guy who's drawing no ownership that I do have interest in is Devin Vassell. We're seeing some people going to Jeremy Sochan, who's fine, but he really hasn't flashed much upside. We have seen upside from Vassell, and if the Spurs are going to keep this game close, the total's pushing 250 points. It's going to be Vassell, Johnson, Wemby that are probably doing a lot of the scoring. Vassell at no ownership. I mean, he's a little bit expensive in that 6K range, but he's someone I do want to get shares of, especially in lineups where I'm maybe heavy on Atlanta.
Yeah, that's definitely a game we want to be having some pieces of for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to your point of like trying to get on low on plays that the index likes, and sorting it by value, you got Clay, Giddey, Chris Middleton, Beasley, and Beasley's been solid with Crowder and now Connaughton out, so maybe low on play.
Yeah.
Al Lowry potentially. Like there are some decent kind of ownership leverage spots on the slate, I would say.
Yeah, there's a bunch. And you already brought up Curry. I think he's standing out to me now. I have to run a refresh. We still have Buddy Hield at 5K on FanDuel, too. They priced him up over on DraftKings, but if he's still 5K flat, I think you could get some shares of him. I do imagine he's pretty popular there, though.
Yeah. He's still at 22 right now. That could go up as well with Miller being ruled out. Kind of around the same price tag. But let's go ahead and pivot on into the forwards. Just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, get those in. We'd be happy to answer those. So looking at it right now, I'm just going to sort it by value.
Okay.
So right now, Clay's still there, Buddy's still there. And then you got Dort, Mann, and then you got Moody, Brown, Miller. I'm going to refresh real quick.
Yeah, I think we're going to see those Charlotte guys shoot up.
Yeah. Should be good to go by now. If not, maybe a couple more minutes, but
yeah, either way.
Give me a second here. All right. So he's no longer showing up. So now PJ Washington's popping up in there a little bit more. Gordon Hayward popping up in there a little bit more. And then you also have DeAndre Hunter, who I think is interesting. And then Samik Bey as well. I think he's also interesting there. You got the chalk and Alexander Walker. So very interesting, especially given the low-owned players, at least on FanDuel, in terms of who the good value plays are projected to be.
Yeah, I see we have Washington popping to the top on both sites now, but not owned. I think what happened is our value in OF Index updated quicker than the ownership projections. So we're going to see Washington shoot up to be complete chalk. And I think he's good chalk. Dort's one guy up here who I'm never excited to play.
Let's go back to that. I don't know if it is. Like, do you like, because I kind of liked him the last couple of games because he was coming in off the bench. He was going to have a higher usage rate off the bench. And we've seen him, really play better. But is it just he's going to get probably more minutes now, maybe 35 instead of the 30 maybe that we were hoping for the last 3 games? Is that more of what it is probably?
Yeah, it's minutes and usage because you got to remember there's no LaMelo on the floor. I mean, LaMelo's only been out to 2 games, so I don't know that that's fully adjusted because the 2 LaMelo games where he's been out, he's been coming off the bench, and it looks like we're getting news that McGowan's is starting for Miller.
Okay.
So as we talk through this, we almost have to backtrack, just backpedal now. And I mean, if Washington's coming off the bench, I think you're right. He's probably not going to be as popular.
I like him more than, honestly, if he's coming off the bench still. I just
and I will say I do trust him more than someone like McGowan's. I mean, I'm looking at what you got pulled up here with this game log. So the one game he played 20 minutes, he did get to 20 fantasy points, and he's near min price. So
multiple position eligibility as well.
Yeah, this is one of those guys, and I don't know. I did this with DeAndre Jordan a few slates ago, where I'm like, I don't want to, but I have to, and he went for 50 points. So yeah, McGowan's is starting to feel like that. If he's going to start, and we project him over say 25 minutes, I think he's going to be tough to get away from. But yeah, man, I'm a little bit surprised they're not starting PJ, but I guess they want to bring him off the bench.
Yeah, they're prioritizing Miles Bridges right now for some reason. I mean, he's been playing well. I shouldn't say for some reason, but I don't know. I guess I like that rotation a little bit more.
Yeah, makes sense.
It'll be interesting. Again, we need to refresh this by the end of the video for Charlotte again. But yes, Washington is still popping up as a good value play on DraftKings. We'll see if that holds up. But I do want to get your thoughts on Bay and Hunter for Atlanta with Jalen Johnson out. They've both been playing pretty well. Their prices haven't come up really too much. I think one of them has a good chance to have a good game. And at their pricing, I think they both are a little bit too low or too low priced.
I agree. I mean, you have those two. You have Hunter, Bay, and then who's the other one?
Bogdanovich.
Yeah, I think all three of them look good. Like, I don't know if I want more than one in any given lineup, but I think they all have upside at their respective price points. I mean, this was almost the case even with Jalen Johnson, and it's like one of these guys would go off every night, just picking the right one. I think there's probably enough usage to go around for maybe two to exceed value now, especially in a matchup like this with the 250 total or close to it. If I'm picking one of the group, I think it's Hunter just because he does the most. Bogdan probably is the highest ceiling because we've seen him score like 40 real points before, but I think Hunter's probably the safest. Bay's a little bit cheaper though and a little bit more popular, but I don't know. I don't think you could go wrong having any three of them in your lineup, but I don't think I want more than one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it almost feels like just go with the lower owned guy here and hope that he hits. Like Hunter, who's the lowest owned right now, has had 4 straight games of over 10 shot attempts, which, give me that with him getting a couple rebounds, a couple steals.
I like it. Yeah, I like Hunter of that group if he's the lowest owned.
And then let's continue on. Like, are you getting to Wemby at all tonight in that pace-up spot? Maybe more so on DraftKings where he's a little bit cheaper?
Yeah, I mean, if I can afford him, I do like him. I know we have Cat priced a little bit cheaper on both sites. I think I'd rather go to Cat with Edwards out, especially if the ownership doesn't come up. But yeah, man. I mean, the last Wemby slate was the one that I won where he got pulled early for no good reason, but he had 6 steals and 4 blocks in 24 minutes. I mean, not that that's something we can rely on, but he wasn't even shooting all that well that game. So we know he has a massive, massive ceiling. I don't know. His floor is lower than some of these expensive options. Like if we're looking at guys between 8 and 9K, but at the same time, I mean, he is a very nice upside play if you can get to him. So yeah, I like Wemby. I'm not going to say he's a core play or anything like that, but I do think he's worth mixing in your lineups for sure, especially on a slate where we're lacking those really expensive centers.
He is questionable. I think we're all expecting him to play, but if he were to sit with Zach Collins and Keldon Johnson, just be locks in this I don't want to say locks, but like heavy plays.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get more of them. Like Collins is already pretty popular on FanDuel where he's power forward eligible. Keldon's pretty expensive, but yeah, they're both going to see big usage. And I already mentioned how much I like to sell. Different position, but extra usage for him as well. So yeah, if Wemby's out, all the starters are going to look good. Maybe they slide Branham in or Osman or Champagne. I mean, I wouldn't be rushing to any of them as value, but whoever starts you could use. And then all the other starters, other than who replaces him, are going to be very appealing. Given that increased usage rate.
Gotcha. All right. And so I feel like we're pretty good to move on to centers. Are there any other forwards that you want to mention?
Let me see here. I will just bring up the Clippers just as like a general group. I mean, I think they all have some form of forward eligibility. We got Harden, we got George, we got Kawhi. It's rare that they all go off on a given night, but it seems every night one does go off. And in that late game, if we're playing Curry, we're playing Thompson, we're getting some shares of Moody. I mean, the front court guys seem to be drawing ownership. I think they all make some sense. It's tough for me to call one a priority over the other. Harden had a great game last night. But yeah, I think one of George, Kawhi, or Harden are solid options if you can afford them as well. And they all seem to be reasonably owned. So fine with any of them. Not going to call any a top priority. But yeah, I think people overlook the Clippers because they don't want to deal with that situation. But in large field tournaments, high-risk contests, they have the ceiling. We're still seeing occasional 50-point games out of all three of them. It's just not on the same night usually.
It's normally what? including the starters, it's like normally 3 out of the, I guess, including Westbrook and then the other 4, like 3 out of the 5 are doing pretty well on a per night basis. It's just figuring out which 3.
Yeah. I almost don't even think about Westbrook just
Yeah.
because that's just me. Like,
Mhm.
his price is up. He's coming off the bench. The minutes are down. I mean, he's been okay. But yeah, for me, Harden, George, Kawhi, I mean, they all feel pretty solid every night. It's just which one's going to really hit the ceiling.
But like I actually think, just sticking with the Clippers, I do think Zubac is, a potential decent play tonight as well. He's kind of been crushing, gets a decent matchup against Golden State. He's only pulling in 7% projected ownership, pretty cheap compared when you compare his price on DraftKings to FanDuel. Projected at 28 minutes. Is he anyone you're looking at tonight?
Yeah, no, he's a good center, good price. I mean, it's funny. I forget who else we were just talking about, how quickly things change in the NBA. But like just a week ago, we were talking about how much Ty Lue disliked Zubac and how Daniel Tice was going to continue to see decent run. It's almost like that lit a fire under Zoo, and he's coming off 3 straight games, 30-plus fantasy points. Not the best matchup here, but certainly one he could do fine in. I mean, especially if Dre's keyed in on Kawhi or George or something like that. So I'm fine with Zubac, good tournament center. Does get into foul trouble on occasion, somewhat inconsistent, but he's been hot. So if he's low owned, he definitely makes some sense here.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of going to be the theme with the center position. I'm just going to go ahead and sort it by ownership. Reed is pulling in as pretty much chalk, and then Capella, Robinson, kind of high owned. You got Towns, Mobley, and Nika, but it's starting to get pretty filtered out. So it's pretty much people are going Reed, probably more in the power forward spot, and then it's really just spread out. I do want to get your quick thoughts on Capella and Mitchell Robinson. They're probably more DraftKings plays, but they're pulling in as pretty high owned there as compared to FanDuel.
Yeah, you can play the 2 centers on DK, which kind of explains why they're more popular. But yeah, I like Capella. I mean, the minutes have been somewhat capped, but this is a good matchup for him. We have seen the ceiling, and 5,700 definitely feels too cheap. Mitchell Robinson, similar play. I mean, high ceiling but low floor, also too cheap for his upside. And yeah, man, I mean, as far as mispricing goes, those 2 guys really definitely stand out, especially on DK. I mean, we could lump Zubac into that group. Probably a little bit riskier. Of the 3, I think I like Capella best because of the matchup. Again, close to a 250 point total. Yeah. Even if he plays 25 minutes, I do think he has upside. I mean, looking at the game logs, he has not been playing a ton of minutes, which gives me some pause. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know, 5,700 for him, good spot. Still no Jalen Johnson. I don't know what it is. Like, Okongwu's getting minutes, but it's almost like they're playing small ball at times. Yeah. And I don't know if it's a matchup thing or what. But yeah, I'd probably have to look deeper into that. But on paper, Capella, Robinson look good. If you want to pivot to Okongwu, I don't think it's insane. Like, definitely a large field tournament type play, though. Claxton, though, I want to go back to 6,300. I mean, he's safer than these guys we're talking about because he's going to play 30 minutes. Like, we're pretty certain about that. Even coming off the injury, 2 out of his last 3 he's played 30. I think the one game he didn't was a blowout. So I like Claxton here at that price. And I mean, if you want to play Williams on the other side for a little bit more, I think he's solid as well. So it's like a pricing tier above, but I really do think if you're living in that 6K range, if you're fine playing Allen in that first game too, he's in the 6K range. I know he was a bit of a disappointment last night, but yeah, the 5K guys all look good at their ownership, but they're all kind of boom or bust. I think if you can get into the 6K range, you get Collins, you get Claxton, Williams. There's another nice tier there as well.
Yeah, and then just kind of sorted just by the value, and we did get some news. I'll touch on that second here. But like Brook Lopez popping in as a good GPP play is what I'm reading that as. At 6K, maybe a little bit too high price. Obviously, can't get to him on FanDuel where he's 7.4. And then value-wise, Chet Holmgren's kind of popping up as a decent play. But Kevon Looney on FanDuel, where he's 4.9, 24% owned, I would say that's probably the correct ownership. But do you want to sacrifice your center position with him because it's too cheap, or kind of what are your thoughts there?
I personally don't, and I'm not going to. It's like they don't need him against the Clippers. Like, yeah, Zubac is good offensively. He does get offensive boards, but it's not a matchup where you need to keep Looney on the floor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if he's popular, that's someone I'm comfortable getting away from. He's not a bad play on paper. I'm not trying to talk you off him, but for me, at high ownership, he's definitely not a guy I'm using to plug up that center spot.
Then lastly, I did want to gather your thoughts on Isaiah Jackson, sorry, with Jalen Smith out. I remember we kind of had this discussion on a
Yeah.
previous slate. Is he someone that gets a bump? I know he's power forward eligible on FanDuel only, and then center eligible, I believe, only on DraftKings. But I think he could be a decent play. Only 3% owned. Okay DK value rating. We haven't projected only to get 17.4 minutes, so probably need to get more minutes. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, this is a tricky one because I mean they can play small with Toppin at the 5. The Heat obviously have Bam, but they're not really playing Thomas Bryant much at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that they need Isaiah Jackson on the floor. I don't think it's insane if you're playing like 150 lineups, like to have a few percent
Yeah.
points, but it's not someone who'd be in any of my first builds. Again, he's been productive when he's on the floor. We just haven't seen the minutes.
For sure. All right, so let's go ahead and get into some more questions that we have here and just kind of some statements. So, Vassell coming off the bench, are you still fine with him on DraftKings? I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, is that starting lineup out? I will say yes because he has been frequently coming off the bench. Just pulling him up here. Yeah, I mean, he's playing like 27, 28 minutes per night, going to see extra usage. So, yeah, I'm fine with him. More of a tournament play. If you're playing cash games, 6,500 feels a little bit expensive. But, yeah, I do like him here at low ownership. I think he's a really strong way to get different.
Okay. And then Sohan or Middleton?
I'm going to have to go with Middleton. Going into the season, I love Sochan, but this experiment trying to force him to play point guard has taken longer, I think, than Pop initially anticipated. He's fine, Sochan, but he's more popular, I think. I think we agree Middleton's a little bit underpriced. The minutes have come up. It's funny. He played 28 minutes, then he got hurt, so he went back to 23 last game. I think he could play 28 again here, and if he does, he's way too cheap. So I like Middleton.
And just watching the games, it's just like, oh man, he is so good. I personally, as a Bucks fan, cannot wait for him to play 36 minutes and just see how this team looks. Like
that injury looked bad, man. I was worried, but he's already back. So
yeah. Speaking of bad injuries, that freaking Anthony Edwards one, that was scary.
Yeah.
But we got news. Zach LaVine is currently out. Okay. So I want to see here. To me, that doesn't really move much. Like Patrick Williams is a player I'd want to get to, but he's priced up, and everyone else is probably just correctly priced. We have seen the usage doesn't really spread out too much. Is there anyone that you personally want to get to?
I mean, my first instinct is to say White and Caruso, but White's priced up. Caruso's okay as value, but he's also priced up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is funny though. I think people might worry now about blowout here, but as good as LaVine is offensively, the Bulls are a much better team without him on the floor defensively right now. So I don't know, man. It's a little bit tricky. Like logic says Vooch and DeRozan should see increased usage. I still don't like the matchup for Vooch against Lopez and Giannis. If anything, I guess this gets me to some DeRozan. Scoring dependent, but if he's going to take extra shots with LaVine out, if this game's going to stay close, it's probably going to be on his back. So I do like DeRozan here. I think Caruso's going to have to play 25-plus minutes. So those two, I guess Caruso and DeRozan would be the pieces I'm interested in. But I don't know. It's the Bucks, and the Bulls are inconsistent. It's really tough to trust them right now. But, I mean, LaVine being out should be significant on paper. It's just
it hasn't been.
Yeah. Still doesn't feel great. Yeah.
I will say I would be fine with Williams even at this price tag if it wasn't against the Bucks, but it is. And same thing with like Kobe White. If his price wasn't that high, given the matchup with the Bucks, I would rather be getting to him. But like, it's both two situations where it's just tough to get to.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll go ahead and get into kind of our final thoughts for the slate, kind of giving you guys a lineup process video. But first, I'm going to touch on the Discord. So as a lot of you guys are probably aware of in this, after this video, we go live on Discord chat. One of us does, one of the familiar faces on these YouTube live videos. So make sure to be checking that out. It's going to be live up until lock and maybe sometimes occasionally after lock. Obviously, there's going to be slate breaking news that probably pops in still. So be in there. And then obviously the model will be updated to the news that we have gotten and to the starting lineup news that we get throughout, up until lineup lock. So let's go ahead and get into the lineup process now. So where is your starting point? I feel like maybe Nick Claxton at center. I think that was the one we both liked the most.
Yeah. And this is kind of more of a tournament thought. Like if you're building a cash flow, Claxton isn't your first guy in. But yeah, I like Claxton. I think He's underpriced. Love the matchup.
Okay, and then who would you see as a starting point then?
I mean, we usually have to follow the chalk. It'd probably be Alexander Walker or Troy Brown.
Okay, maybe both too.
Yeah, both. I mean, Anderson's the most popular, but I feel like I trust him less than those other two, just because he's not always involved on offense. Maybe that's an error. He's almost 60% owned, so like in cash games, just eat it, just play
Yeah.
him. But,
it's weird because he's not safe, but he does have massive GPP upside as well. Like he could. It's a weird play.
It is. But I think Alexander Walker.
I'm going to go both of them.
Definitely want. So yeah, you could go 2 or 3 Timberwolves there.
And then honestly, that's the thing. I know you like Mike Conley. I think that's more of a FanDuel play. I think I want to get to both Towns and Rudy Gobert because I feel like they're both a little bit too cheap. But is that too thin? I know we'd probably have to eat the chalk after that if we did that.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, we're going to be looking for value, I think, at guard. But yeah, I mean, if you want to try it, we can see how it looks.
Okay, let's try it. I just think the likelihood of them at least hitting value is pretty great tonight against Utah. Could be wrong, but
no, I'm with you. Hopefully, it stays close though, because Utah has been terrible.
That's the concern. But hey, no one's really that much of an offensive threat now, maybe besides Towns for.
Yeah, that's true.
I am trying to look at Charlotte. No one's really popping up too much just yet. McGowan's is only 11%. I do feel like we might need to get there if he's going to be playing 25 minutes, even at low ownership. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think McGowan's makes sense. There's no one else that cheap that I trust at all.
Okay. Guard, or we'll go forward, I think, for that.
Yeah, and then I also want to say Moody if he starts.
Right.
I don't know if he's going to though.
I agree, and then we're gonna have a lot of salary left over here for point guard. 10.7 SGA, I think would be fine with that, right?
Yep, I love SGA always.
Yeah, that's not bad. So that's a decent one. And then let's just kind of retrack or go back to FanDuel real quick. Like Curry, a very strong play. I think we both said. Who else would you be looking at? Mike Conley, you said.
Yeah, I really like Conley and Curry on FanDuel. I mean, generally speaking, healed on FanDuel as well. I like Trae Young on both sides if you can afford him. I really like the matchup against the Spurs. He's been solid. Doesn't seem to want to get over 10K compared to some of these other guards, but he has the same ceiling. I did want to touch on Mr. Kalista's question here. Alexander Walker seems affordable, but does he have any ceiling at all? I mean, with Edwards out, he should, but I will say at the same time, I mean, if you find other guys in that price range that you like more, feel free to pivot. Like these are chalk pieces that are good in your low risk and cash game contests because they open things up for you, but I don't think he's going to kill you. Like it's going to shock me if Alexander Walker goes for 40 fantasy points here. Yeah. I think you're fine, especially if you're mixing in someone like McGowan now for very cheap. I think it's easier to get away from some of that chalk. And then, there's a lot of good centers. So, I mean, I don't know. I will give some strategy here. So we have this game, Portland-Cleveland, at 7 p.m. There's pieces there that you could consider. For me, I'm just skipping it. I'm going to wait for more news. I have to jump to the Discord after this. I'm answering questions already. So, I just want to make sure that I like my lineups where they stand. And if any other news is breaking, we'll be able to process that with the model update, et cetera. So I don't think there's any core plays in that game. I mean, you got the Cavs as 12-point favorites at home against the Trailblazers. They're both healthy. I'm fine just skipping it and then just building for 7:30 on. I think that's a really good way to go about it tonight, just to make sure you're getting all the value. We get those starting lineups after 7 p.m. So Eastern that is. So just a good idea to wait for now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I like Brogdon as a play, but to your point, you could probably find other similar plays like Darius Garland and
you got Rozier the same price. Yep. I mean, there you
go. Real quickly though, to your point about the Alexander Walker, where you said he probably doesn't have 40-point upside, that's kind of why I like Kyle Anderson. We have seen him have just random blow-up games in somewhat-ish similar situations where it was Gobert or Towns or Ant-Man out last year, and that's where I'm kind of okay getting to him a little bit more, but so is the public. So, You're getting ready on the Discord there.
Yeah, I'm typing. I'm trying to do a half a cheat sheet here, and
I gotcha. No, that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
We can go ahead and finish it up here. I don't think we have any more questions here. So that's going to be all for this video, guys. Thanks for being here. Check out the live stream tomorrow. It's going to be at the exact same time. If you guys want to head over to the Discord, Nick's going to be in there for you guys in just a few seconds.
Awesome. Take care, everyone.